Many of Dr. Lee's investigations have hinged on blood evidence, not least a mysterious murder case in Florida, where all was not as it seemed. Police were called to the scene, where they found the body of 46-year-old Stephen Haynes, naked and face down in a garage. Haynes' live-in partner, Susan Barrett, had discovered his bruised body amidst a bloody scene. 3 days later, Barrett was charged with second-degree murder. She confessed to fatally striking Haynes with a wine bottle during an argument. But Barrett's lawyer harbored deep suspicions that her confession was false and had been extracted under duress. He contacted the only person besides the great detective himself who could help.
I went to the crime scene, blood all over the place. So, obviously, violent, active scene. They jumped to the conclusion that's a homicide without check the detail. I said, why don't we use Sherlock Holmes logic? Now, that could be a homicide, could be a suicide, and could be a staging, could be even an accident. So if you walk in the scene, definitely it's a homicide, and this person looked guilty, therefore this individual killed this victim. Let's jump to the conclusion. Now we have to have an open mind, have different possibilities. When you eliminate all the impossible, whatever's remain become more probable.
Examining the blood evidence at the scene, Dr. Lee was immediately drawn to the spots on the floor.
Regular blood drop touch the surface from a certain height, leave a certain size, usually circular. I look at those blood spots, found they had no center. Just periphery area have blood, center lack of blood. Those type of pattern I call ghost center or a holy spot, blood drops. That indicate to me more likely the individual vomiting blood, coughing the blood. That individual's blood mixed with air. During the drying process, the air bubble busted. That's why I leave a holy center. Now, Mr. Hans loved to drink and often get drunk. Most chronic alcoholic people have liver cirrhosis. So the blood sometimes got to their lung and they're vomiting out. So at the crime scene, when we see those patterns, I can reach a conclusion. That's because chronic alcoholism, vomiting blood. In addition, when I look at the autopsy picture, the 170-some injury or bruises, no open cut. I suggest the lawyer search all the hospital record. For now, in that period of time, ambulance been called 15 times. Every time he got drunk, he bumped into tables, bureaus, and caused all those bruises. Not really a spouse abuse. I was able to show Hans died of a chronic alcoholism, which the prosecutor agreed and the judge agreed, and the case was dismissed because this careful observation based on Sherlock Holmes' logic, we was able to eliminate homicide as a cause.
Sherlock Holmes himself was hugely influential in his abilities to use blood evidence in deducing many details about a crime scene.
Well, there's some blood staining here.
Yes, sir.
I picked that book off the floor.
Was the bloodstain above or below?
On the sides, next to the boards.
Which proves, of course, the book was dropped after the crime was committed. I'd conjecture it was dropped by the murderer in his hurried flight.
Karen Smith is one of America's top crime scene investigators. This female Sherlock has investigated 20,000 crime scenes, over 500 deaths, and is an expert in blood spatter analysis. A very Sherlockian application of blood spatter analysis became a surprising and decisive element in one of America's most notorious murder trials, that of Dr. Sam Shepherd. On July 4th, 1954, in their home in Bay Village, Ohio, Dr. Sam Shepherd's pregnant wife, Marilyn, was found murdered.
The crime scene in the Dr. Sam Shepherd case was one of the most convoluted, chaotic crime scenes, and it still fascinates me to this day. Dr. Sam Shepherd was accused of murdering his wife, Marilyn, in their home in Ohio. She was found in her bed, face up. Her legs had been pulled underneath the foot of the bed railing, and she had been bludgeoned to death. Her top had been pulled up, her bottoms had been pulled down, and she was left there with part of a sheet covering her midsection. The good doctor said that he had been sleeping on the daybed downstairs, and he awoke to find an intruder in the home, which he described as a form that bludgeoned him in the head, and he lost consciousness. When he came to, the form was in his house, and he chased it down onto the beach behind their house, down this very steep stairwell, down a rocky embankment, down to the beach, fought the attacker again down on the beach, lost his shirt in the process, became completely wet, saturated himself, at which point he was knocked unconscious again on the beach, came to, went back upstairs to the house, where he then went upstairs and found Marilyn dead in bed, and then alerted the police. Crazy crime scene.
The suspicion was that Dr. Shepherd's story of a mysterious form that he fought with on the beach was a lie to cover up that he'd murdered Marilyn, destroyed his blood-stained shirt, and cleaned himself of blood.
One of the things that's alleged to have occurred is that there was an intruder who was alleged to have also tried to rob the home of valuables. And to that end, the intruder was alleged to have rifled through a desk in the downstairs area, and during which time items got knocked on the floor and broken. And this was evidence, ostensibly, of a home invasion with a robbery. On close inspection, however, nothing was actually taken from that area. And hearkening sort of back to the way that Sherlock Holmes would look at this case is, what makes sense? What actually happened? What would have happened? What would be the outcome of these things?
He did not remember a whole lot, and when he took the stand in his own defense, which he did, a lot of it was, I don't recall, because I was knocked unconscious. It was very vague.
Dr. Sam Shepherd was convicted of his wife's murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. But his legal team brought in a specialist to reinvestigate the case. Leading forensic scientist, Dr. Paul Kirk.
He's a big guy in the world of science, and he was one of the only private forensic scientists in the country. So that made him a huge name in forensic science.
Dr. Paul Kirk was a leader in forensic science, especially in blood pattern analysis. He wrote all kinds of papers. They're still used today. So he was definitely a front runner back in the day.
Like Sherlock Holmes, Paul Kirk was all about examining trace evidence, examining small bits of evidence to connect people to crime, examining patterns, and considering the big picture of a case to figure out what exactly happened.
Using that Holmes whole scene approach, what Kirk did is he looked at the entire house. He looked at the beach. He looked at the photos. He looked at the bedroom where it happened, including all of the walls, the ceiling, the floor, the radiator, the closet doors.
Just as Sherlock had done in fiction, Dr. Kirk concentrated on the minute detail and found something that had been missed at the first trial: blood spatter.
If you look at the spatter pattern I created, these blood droplets here were a direct impact at a 90-degree angle. They came straight into the wall this way. As you travel this direction, you can see they become oval. They also have tails, and the tails are indicative of the direction the blood was traveling when it impacted the wall. So as we follow this direction, you can see the more elongated the shapes become, and that's because they are hitting the wall at a sharper angle. They also travel in an arc all the way down toward the floor, and once they hit the floor, they once again turn into a circle because they're impacting again at a 90-degree angle toward the floor. What he did is he looked at the blood spatter patterns on the ceiling and walls, and there's a certain type of spatter pattern called a cast-off. Cast-off is when blood is flung off a weapon onto a substrate.
Cast-off allowed Dr. Kirk to tell the number of blows struck and what direction they came from. But Dr. Kirk was certain the blood evidence could tell him more.
He realized that there was an area in the room that was lacking the same patterns as the rest of the room. It's called a void pattern, where blood should be, but isn't. So he deduced that the person that was blocking it had the blood on them and on the weapon. Instead of it going behind them on the wall, it landed on their person. And that's where the perpetrator must have been standing when he or she committed this heinous act.
By meticulous examination of both the cast-off and void blood patterns, in true Sherlockian style, Dr. Kirk was able to make an extraordinary deduction about the murderer.
Was he placed the weapon in the left hand and realized if you go back with the left hand, you're going to leave a certain arc pattern on the ceiling and the wall behind you. If you place it in the right hand and do the same motion, it's obviously going to leave a different pattern on the ceiling in a different portion of the ceiling and wall. If you place it in the right hand and you do a cross body, you can see the arc pattern would be completely different and would be dispersed further away and at a sharper angle than it would have been if it was a straight-on left-hand shot over the shoulder. And with deductive reasoning, as Holmes would have done, he deduced that the perpetrator must have been left-handed.
Paul Kirk's finding changed the whole course of events. Dr. Sam Shepard was right-handed. In a subsequent retrial, Sam Shepard was acquitted of all charges. Sherlock's unique deductive thinking influenced Kirk and generations of investigators.